The ETF inspector. It's Wednesday, May 21st. That means it's declaration day for our weekly paying dividend funds as well as Group B. This is the video for the two weekly paying funds, Ulti YieldMax's Ultra Option Income Strategy ETF and LFGY YieldMax's Crypto Industry and Tech Portfolio Option Income ETF. So we'll take a look at how the stock market did. It was off to a decent start, but then the bond auction did not go well. 30 years went over 5%, and higher interest rates means equities go down in general. So there was a sell-off, and as you can see, a lot of similar patterns throughout the day. So almost everything was red, if you noticed on the thumbnail. But we'll look through, and since I forgot to go back on the last video, I'll talk about just the biggest winner and biggest loser for each fund before I start, because once I got in the middle, I forgot to go back. So for Ulti, there wasn't really much gaining at all, but the best one, obviously, CoreWeave had a huge day, up 19%. And the biggest loser within Ulti was Reddit, down 9.27%. I'd like to say I'd remember to come back to this when we get to the LFGY, but I won't. So let's just hit it. CleanSpark, CLSK, was the biggest winner, 4.23% up. And NU Holdings Limited, was the biggest loser, down 6.11%. All right, let's get into our funds. But first, like I said, it was declaration day. So LFGY coming in at 49.16 cents. And I just included all the closing prices on the funds to show the annual yield based off of that. So LFG paid a 63.35% yield. Chippy, just under 40 cents. RDTY, 34.46 cents. QDTY, 32.49. GPTY, 29.05. SDTY, 27.32 cents. YMAG, 0.2595. YMAX, 0.1860. And Ulti, just under 10 cents, 0.0979, which comes out to be the second best over here out of the weeklies, at 83.46% annualized yield. So that's nice. Group B, if you've got any of them, obviously Pallady stole the show with an over $7 distribution. That's the new record, and that came out to be 134%. And if you follow Retire on Dividends, he's been watching them obviously for a long time, but all month, and we knew they were 10, 15, and at one point nearly $20 per share that they had earned. I think it ended around 15. They only paid out about 7. They got to pay out 90% by the end of the fiscal year. So unless they start having some losing months, the last handful of distributions in the year are going to have a little extra on them. All right. Marrow up $1.97. NVIDIA $1.62. Babo, why couldn't they just say $1? 9998. FBY, I cover that fund, 63.69 cents. JPMO 0.3923. GDXY 0.3739. DIPS 0.3528. And Murney 0.1215. All right, let's get to the reason you're here. Ulti and LFGY. Let's start with the trades, because that's going to give us a little bit of insight on things. So they bought more shares of NVIDIA, sold their shares of Kava Group. So that was 90,000. I believe that was everything. Yep, so we won't be talking about Kava Group anymore. Added a position in Marvell Technology, 125,000 shares, and increased their position in Webull. by another 300,000 shares. I don't consider this options income options trading, so I don't include that into my wins and losses. I don't know if you like that or not. Okay, so as far as Webull, they, like we said, they added to their position, so they, what'd they do? Sold calls at 14, and then they bought at 16.50, right? So that netted them around 70,000. Then they closed out. I think they had a put spread going on here, and they closed that out. They were all pennies: 4 cents, 7 cents, 10 cents. So overall, they made $27,000 trading options on Webull. Kava Group, they just closed out the options that went along with the shares since they're out of it now. Closed that out obviously for a win, 5 cents. The stock went down, so the put increased in value. So they got to keep the money from the sale, plus they made money on the insurance policy. They made $55,000 on the way out the door for Kava. CoreWeave, that was the big winner, so obviously enormous 19% increase. That's going to hurt when you got to cover those calls. You got to buy them up to close them. As you can see, large amounts of money, over $2 million lost. So they went ahead and closed out the positions they had at $88 and $90. And they started new ones at $110, $112, and $115. All right. But obviously, you're going to take a huge loss when a stock goes up 19%. But let's see on the flip side. So that was a $2 million loss. But when CoreWeave went up $19 million, it was a $2.7 million gain in value. So it's not all bad. First Solar closed out their calls ending this Friday at 182.50. Opened them for next Friday at 175. Overall win of $181,000. Marvell Technology, we just bought the stock, so we went ahead and started a collar, right? So we sold calls and bought puts to protect our shares and to make money off of them. 1,250 contracts, bringing in $123,000 on the first day of trading. We sold them out for next Friday. NVIDIA, again, we added to the shares, so they went ahead and started the strategy on them as well, selling calls at 144 out till next Friday. Overall gain of 38,000 in income. Palantir, what did we do? Looks like we closed out our 133s and 135s for this week and opened 126s and 130s for next week, and the associated puts to go with them. Overall, an increase of 159,000. Reddit, we closed our 121 for this week, opened to 107 for next week. 1,000 contracts, gain of 263,000. So these are wins. Rigetti closed out the 13s for this week, opened 12s for next week. $91,000 gain. SMCI closed this week's, is that 50, I think, and opened 47s for next week. 100,000 gain. And Snowflake, we took a loss, had to close out this week's 182.50s and opened 200s still for this week. So we're still trying to make some money here at the end, but today's trading lost us 376,000. Overall, we total all those up, and it comes to a loss of 1.4 million in trading today. And as you can see, right, stock market went down, so we also lost almost 7.5 million. Just wanted to point out, right, we talked about it, but we had our estimate. Based on the IV was 9.03 cents. Our guess here at ETF Inspector was 10 cents. Came out to be 9.79, so I was 2% away from getting it right. Not bad. All right, let's get through the change in values of the holdings. Right, almost everything went down. C3.ai down 5.5% to 21.87, loss of 400,000 in value. These calls are now way out of the money. 16%. Almost all calls are getting way out of the money now. AST Space Mobile down 4.79% to 23.83. Calls are way out of the money. Loss of 570,000 in value. Webull up 3.11% to 12.59. The calls are still safe at 15%. $152,000 gain. Kava Group, we don't need to talk about it because we closed those out. We don't have that anymore. Coinbase lost just under 1% to 258.99. Calls are 8% out of the money, and we lost 109,000. We talked about CoreWeave going up 19%. That blew these away. We closed them though, so we don't need to talk about it. Increased by getting close to $3 million on that one. Dell Technologies lost 2% to 111.93. 7% out of the money on the 120 calls. 161,000 loss in value. Value only, right? We didn't actually sell anything here for a loss. So it's not a realized loss. This is unrealized. First Solar down 2.3% to 163.37. 11% out of the money on the calls. I think we actually talked about First Solar, so those got closed out for a win. $173,000 loss. Hims and Hers down 5.24% to 58 even. Calls are 15% out of the money. Loss of 640,000 in value. Robinhood down 1.62. That helps because these calls were getting a little close. So they're now 3% out of the money. And the puts are almost 3% out of the money. So currently we are trading right in that sweet spot. If Robinhood can end the week between 62 and 66, we keep the maximum amount of money based off of the options sold because we have a put spread and a call spread, and a collar. IonQ lost 5% to 33.54. They're now just over 5% out of the money, so we needed that. Those were dangerously close. Loss of 575,000 in value. Mara down 2.16% to 15.84. The 1750 calls are now 10+% out of the money. Lost 218,000 in value. MicroStrategy down 3.41 to 402.69. Just barely got our 405 calls out of the money, so that helped. 420s are 4.3% out of the money. And this is a tight window too, trying to trade between 400 and 405. That's the sweet spot. That's where it's sitting. So these guys will look like geniuses if the weekend's here. But it's a $500,000 loss of value. NVIDIA Corp down 1.92% to 131.80. 9% out of the money on the 144 calls. 263,000 loss. Oklo down 2% to 36.81. Their calls are now 15+% out of the money. And a loss of 227,000. Palantir lost about 4% to 120.58. Their calls, I think we talked about trading some of them, right? We did, yep. So what was it? The 133s and the 135s. Yep, so these are all closed out and there's new ones. 661,000 loss of value. Reddit, the biggest loser for the day, 9.27% loss to 95.85. Those were now 26%. Did we trade Reddit? We did, yep. So we closed those out for a win. So we don't have the new information yet. That download comes out tomorrow morning. So that's why all of this is older information. It's how the newer information can compare to it and give us these changes. Rigetti down 8%, 1096. We talked about those got traded as well, but that's a loss of 624,000 in value. RH down 5.74 to 195.60. 17% out of the money, $244,000 loss. Sorry if I'm going too fast for newer people. I just feel like I'm reading so many numbers throughout the video. I don't want to bore you to death, but at the same time, I don't want to lose new people, right? So almost every single one of these stocks, well, pretty much all of them now, they sell calls off their shares, so they're covered calls. And the goal is that the stock price never hits the strike price, so we get to keep all the premium from the sale. All right, SMCI loss of 151,000. Snowflake lost 2% to 179.12. That helped. They were in the money. They're now out of the money by just a hair. We need them to stay under 182.50. That was a loss of 169,000. TNA, it's a triple leveraged fund by Direxion, small cap bull market, lost 8.44%, so they were challenging to be the biggest loser, lost almost $1 million in value, took the calls well out of the money to 10.76, but they're trying to trade. This was the tightest window. They got a put spread at 31 is the sold puts, and they got sold calls at 31.50. So they need this to trade within a 50-cent range to get the maximum profit. Good luck with that on a triple leverage fund. Another triple leverage, TQQQ, lost 4.16% to 67.94. Safely bringing these, well, I say safely, to 7% out of the money, but on a triple leverage fund, it doesn't take much to change 7%. That was a loss of $722,000, and again, they've got sold puts at 72, sold calls at 73. They needed to trade within a $1 range. Getting towards the end, Tesla lost 2.68% to 334.62, bringing their calls 7.58% out of the money. Those are 360s. They lost $423,000. Upstart lost 5.83%. to 43.92, 11% out of the money on their calls. Their $48 puts, 9% in the money now. It's going to cost them to close it out. $600,000 loss. $200,000 loss on Vertiv, losing 2.61% to 103.61. Their calls are 5% out of the money. Their put is 1% in the money. So they need this to trade between 105 and 109 for maximum profit. And Vistra Corp lost 3.16% to $347,000 loss. Stock price of 152.07. 160 calls are 5% out of the money. 157.50 puts are 3.57% in the money. So yesterday we became a $300 billion fund, and today we're going to have lost it because we lost $7.4 million. But we'll get it back. So Ulti itself closed at 6.11. There was 925,000 shares added to the outstanding shares, so people are buying into the fund. And that NAV will update tomorrow, so that's not current. It always is within a couple cents. Okay, so lost a lot on the value of the underlyings. Lost a decent amount on our trades, but a lot of them are moved out to the next week, and we've got a lot of, obviously you can see, all this green is going to turn into a whole lot of winners at the end of the week. So, all right, so stay tuned for that. Next, we will move into LFGY. Yeah, that was nice. All right, LFGY, our other weekly payer. All right, I've hidden all the lines we've already talked about, so we don't have to scroll so much. But yeah, so just so you see, when we open up our intraday trades for the download, here's all the information that I have to input. Here's where Ulti starts. These are just today's trades. And then we finish that, and here's where LFGY starts. Here's all of today's trades. So always the biggest ones. Maybe that's why people don't want to cover them. But if you've got money in them, you're probably interested in what your money's doing. If you're anything like me, I used to just buy into funds or stocks or whatever and just see what happens. Now I like to I love to be able to see what my money did every single day. All right, so without further ado, we'll get into it. I'm not going through every single individual trade on LFGY the way we do for Ulti. Ulti groups theirs together to make sure they only have like 1 or 2 strikes, and they trade full amounts at a time. LFGY, anything goes. 82 contracts, 1 contract, 24, right? 3,483. So you'd have a spreadsheet a mile long if you were trying to really keep up with all that stuff. So I just download it, make sure we got all the information right, and then total it all up. So looks like we were selling calls on BitDeer, selling them on Clean Spark. I'll try to make sure I got all these. Selling on Coinbase, right? I can't remember what CORS stands for. Core Scientific, selling calls. GameStop, selling calls. Hood, selling calls. Hut Corp, selling calls. Mara, same thing. MBTX, Meli, that's a like a Spanish word. Mercado Libre, MicroStrategy. So we're just selling lots of calls, right? Not a whole lot of I don't see any really like rolling of positions. Just seems like a lot of just individual trading. So, and again, right, if you're talking about $100 million fund, we don't really want to get into the weeds and talk about $120 loss. So total it all up. Big picture comes to trading today. They profited $115,000. All right. So on Monday they made a $500,000 profit. On Tuesday a $42,000 profit, and on Wednesday $115,000. Just trying something new. This is just the amount of money made on options trading divided by the amount of shares. So they made us 19 cents a share on Monday, 2 cents a share on Tuesday, and 4 cents a share on Wednesday. We'll see how the rest of the week goes, and that is just the options trading, not the unrealized gains or losses in the underlyings. So those will just help with making the estimate. All right, LFGY. Let's see. Coinbase, I think, is the biggest holding in here. 14.3% of the money is in that. 11+% in MicroStrategy. Yeah, so those are our 2 biggest. Almost 10% in IBIT. Right. So, okay. BitDeer closed at 14.75. Lost 5.39%. Their calls are now 8.5% out of the money. It was a loss of $258,000. Clean Spark was up 4.23% to 10.11. That actually took their calls into the money. They'll cost money to close out. I'm sure they got more than 20 cents for them though. So we'll see how that ends. $200,000 gain. Coinbase, we talked about it on the part with Ulti, but these guys have different strike prices, so their calls are 9% out of the money. Now you'll notice a difference. They don't trade the same way over here, right? So on some they've got a call spread, so they've got insurance. On others they don't. They just got 2 different calls sold, so nothing backing it up. Just a call sold, just a call sold, just calls sold. So they play riskier over here in LFGY, and obviously if you're into crypto, you're probably already into risky stuff anyway. So, but back to the numbers. Core Scientific, 2% out of the money on their calls that are sold, even though they lost 1.28%. So those were real close. $72,000 loss. Don't know why the screen did that. GameStop, they lost $74,000, but their calls are 8% out of the money. Should be closing them for a win. Robinhood lost 1.62 to 63.86, $95,000 loss. Their calls are still in the money even with that loss. Just the smaller one. They got 58 contracts there, but they got 856 contracts that are out of the money. So obviously, larger value difference. Hut Corp lost 2.79 to 1636 as a $154,000 loss and 10% out of the money on their call now at 18. IBIT, they don't have options on it, so they just they just trade it straight up. So that gained 1.4%, picked up 159,000 in value. Mara lost 2.16%. I think we talked about them in the last one. Here's another one, even crazier. So MBTX, they don't even own the shares, so they just trade the options on it. I guess it's not that crazy, so because they've got a spread. At least they didn't do it naked. So they've sold at $260, they've bought at $285. Still a $25 potential loss on 432 contracts. That could be pricey. Meli, M-E-L-I, gained 0.88%, picking up 46,000 in value. They're at 2601, and their calls are still 2% out of the money. MicroStrategy, we talked about it in the last one, lost 3.4%. In this fund, it lost them nearly 500,000. It helped them. These shares were in, these calls, 415, were in the money. They're now out of the money, and these are further out of the money, the 415s and the 427.50s. They're almost even on the split there, 154 contracts and 173. We're almost done. NU Holdings lost 6.11, I think. Yep, those were our biggest loser on LFGY. They went to $11.99, lost 279,000 in value, and that brought their calls to 12 and 8% out of the money. 1350 and 13. Obviously, 1350 is the big one. 3,400 plus contracts. NVIDIA has 142 calls for this week and for next week. That's why there's two of the same thing there. But they lost 1.92% to 131.80, $56,000 loss, and almost 8% out of the money. Opera went down 2.77 to 17.99 or 17.90. I'm sorry, lost 130,000 in value. Their call is 11% out of the money. PayPal lost 1.32%, bringing their calls to 1.88% out of the money. So they were really getting close to being in the money at the 73. They're now at 71.65. That was a loss of 43,000. Riot lost 1% to 884. Calls at 950 and 10 are 7 and 13% out of the money. $49,000 loss. Tesla lost 2.68% to 334.62. $146,000 loss and 10% out of the money on their 370 calls. And finally, Block lost 3.31% to 55.44. 6% out of the money on their $59 calls and $82,000 loss. That all totals a $1.85 million loss in value on the day. If you're new, right, I go red's in the money, and in the money sounds good if you don't know selling options, but if you sell an option, you don't want it to be in the money. So red's bad. It's going to cost money to purchase it at the end. If you sell a call, you have to either buy it to close or you have to let it get assigned unless it expires worthless. So, and they're not looking to get assigned here, so they're going to pay to close things out. Yellow means it's in the money, it's in our favor, but it's getting close to being in danger. And then green, greater than 5%. Out of the money, we've got a little bit of breathing room. As far as shares, there's 2.8 million shares of the fund. That's an increase of 75,000 shares from yesterday. So picking up a little bit of traction. I think that's just about everything I've got for you. If you're still awake after I've read you numbers for 30 minutes, congratulations. You have earned yourself a dad joke of the day. First, I just want to thank everybody for watching. Thanks for all the comments. I read them all. I try to respond to all of them. Lots of encouragement. So you guys are great. Thank you. If you haven't liked or subscribed, please do. It's free for you, and it helps me trying to get to the goal of 1,000 subscribers. So, okay, dad joke of the day. Why did the envelope take so long to get ready? It had to get addressed. My kids got me a dad joke calendar, so I get it every day. Just peel off the joke, read it to them, read it to you. Okay, I hope you have a nice night, and good luck trading tomorrow.